I was working from a revenue goal. So it kind of not muddies up, but it changes the incentives of your decisions when you're based on revenue rather than fulfillment, or rather than trying, okay, what's the tooling of this offer that adds the most value and actually builds a business. Like I said, we kind of talked about off camera. My goals were to stay lean, and to have no more than a few people, because I just see what the trends of like where this industry and where a lot of other industries are headed with AI and everything. That
Welcome back to the Seven Figure Leap podcast. We have a very special series that we are starting and kicking off today with a good friend, Andy Milligan. So Andy is someone that has been on my radar for a long time. He's been an active part of my LinkedIn presence, and he responds to newsletters and sends me updates. And I could tell he's a really relationship-driven dude. And so I thought, when I saw his name come in through the application process to have a seat in this coaching series, I thought he'd make the perfect first guest. So the whole idea behind the coaching series is this is the last time I'm going to kind of like talk to you as an audience member. I'm really going to fully focus on Andy. We're going to learn about his business, his goals, and we're just going to jump right into strategy. So unlike most of our interviews, there's not going to be a bunch of backstory. There's not going to be a bunch of context for me. It's really a coaching session, as if Andy paid me and said, look, I need laser coaching to grow my business through partnerships, perhaps podcast guesting. And that's really the objective today. So Andy, I'm really excited to just be here in a virtual room with you, get to know you a little bit better, and most importantly, hopefully give you some really tactical, practical help for your business. So please, Andy Milligan, take it away. Just give us a little context, quick backstory, but mostly like a snapshot of what your business is today.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm like really excited to do this. It's not an opportunity I take lightly. I know we talked a little bit off camera about mentorship and taking the opportunities to be case studies for the people, and I very much am seizing this. So I want to thank you just for the opportunity. I'll give this the short, long version of my story, but basically, I'm the founder of MMG Designs, my web design strategy studio that I operate here in Columbus, Ohio. And the short version, kind of my personal story, is it ranges from golf to personal training, onto this path of eventually marketing and web design. So like I said, the short version of that is I have always kind of been in some kind of a marketing niche, but I grew up playing golf. I built a lot of connections in a network through that industry. I eventually went on to play in college. And while I was in college, the second university I was at was called the University of Findlay. And they had this program that was called the Oiler 10. So the Findlay mascot is an oiler, which for those of you who don't know is like a big buff construction dude who works on like oil machines. And they had this group that was called the Oiler 10. And basically it was a marketing program for athletes, because we couldn't go on these internships and like opportunities and travel trips that a lot of the people that were in the marketing program could go on. And basically we would work for free for local businesses in exchange for donations to the university, because we couldn't take money. And so we would meet at 5:30 in the mornings on Wednesday, me and a bunch of other athletes throughout the school. And we just got to work for free. And was my testing ground into like actually learning what I like to do in marketing. And I got the sort of labeled as the branding designer creative in that group. And when you're doing something for free, you really are just doing it for the love of it. And at the time I was going to school for, a marketing major, and I was personal training on the side. That's kind of another chapter of it. But I really learned that, my skill set in design and branding was something that I was infinitely passionate about. So after I graduated school, went on and worked at an agency for a year before transitioning, and I had enough runway to go full time with my own strategy studio and doing web design. We started more in traditional graphic design, and a lot of the small businesses that I've worked with were like, okay, well, and I heard this one moment like on a podcast a while ago, is that websites are the closest thing to the sale, so they are the most important in terms of branding your messaging. And eventually, like all the businesses I was doing traditional graphic design for, the next question for them was always the website side. Like, okay, we have the branding. Now the next step is, okay, how are we getting online? And that's really kind of how I got started. And since then, 2 years, been building the business, and eventually to the point where it is now. As of last month, we're in August of this year. I've been recording and documenting my journey kind of the entire way as I've built the company. Right now, I only have one other contractor that I work with. I'm still do 95% of the fulfillment of for myself. And the business model in and of itself that we offer, a lot of it is website strategy consulting, but we do have 3 offers. One of them is kind of a done with you offer. So it's a basically in self implementation, and something that we'll talk about a lot, Dustin, is sort of meeting your audience where they're at, because especially when you have a high ticket offers like that, like what's kind of the funnel, the foot into the door. For me, like that, it's been a lot of the free stuff with the newsletter and content. But I'd love to jam with you on how I can make this kind of massive things I've got going on a little bit more cohesive. But currently, the low ticket offer right now, and I know I said I was going to give the short version, so I'm kind of trying to transition a little bit. But the low ticket offer is kind of a done with you, and it's just a $500 self implementation. So people who want another set of eyes on their website, identify their offer, their audience, make sure it's branded more towards them, but they don't want to invest in a full build. I basically do a breakdown of their website. We also do free website audits. So people, it's just kind of a lead magnet put in the door, gets them onto the newsletter and mailing list. But the low ticket offer is just a self implementation. So I basically record a video going over, I export all the pages on their site. I do a breakdown and basically give them some design elements to work with and talk through the strategy and the messaging and give them to then implement themselves. And in terms of like website development, we have two offers. We have a landing page offer, and this was based on a lot of feedback that I've gotten kind of getting started, is that a lot of times people don't need SEO marketing strategy. They just need a domain they can connect, that basically a landing page, something that's one page, responsive, online, brands them well, highlights their offers, is kind of on point with their goals. Um, and obviously has like the conversion mechanisms of the contact form, their core pages that all websites need to have. Um, and that's the 3K offer that's in the middle there. So sort of you picture like like the popcorn at the movie theaters. That's the big one you want in the middle. That's what the one they're trying to get you to buy. Because personally, from a business standpoint, staying lean, sort of my goals, is that's a very profitable one for me, because it's just the balance of the biggest value add and also time investment on my end. I have a really good process behind the tools and software I use to be able to build that quickly. And then anything above that is our full build offer, and that starts at 10,000. So that's anything with a bigger marketing engine behind it. You have multiple target personas, audiences, different offers that you have to align with a different website, a bigger picture website strategy, and that's a very much a hands-on approach. Usually a much longer strategy in terms of timeline, and we have multiple sessions throughout the phase of that process to be able to serve any type of website needs that they have.
And so it's like a custom build. So free audit, lead magnet, front end offer, $500 website breakdown that they can go implement themselves or hire someone on Fiverr or something if they don't have money to invest. Kind of the bread and butter productized service, it sounds like, is the landing page build out. So a single landing page, high converting. It's got all the fundamental things you need for like contact forms, email capture. 3K sounds like that. I'll come back to that. That's the middle tier, but maybe the preferred tier in many cases. And then the full build out is obviously 10K and up. Custom build is going to vary depending on the client's needs. Is that a good capture of the three main offers?
You were listening, indeed.
It was. So give us a snapshot, kind of big picture, if you don't mind sharing, like the kind of trailing 12-month revenue, sort of like where you at on an annualized basis.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned in the beginning, I started with an income goal. So start of 2025. Kind of before that point, it was been in business for about 18 months or so. I was really saying yes to a lot of more custom scoped projects. I've had these more defined offers laid out within the last 6 months. So we're still in the testing phase, and I've gotten some decent feedback to kind of gauge where I think some of the value is, and we can sort of expand on that as you make your recommendations too. So in terms of this 2025, I've been documenting my journey to making six figures in revenue as a freelancer, basically. And the seventh month, we actually hit that revenue wise. So now I'm kind of in a point now where I'm transitioning to how do I make either this model or something similar to it. Now that I have my needs checked in terms of income, I'm really focusing on like process and like, okay, what's the biggest value add for what, and also what do I enjoy doing, because there's a big part of it. I really over indexed on like working really hard, especially getting started. I think a lot of people that are probably listening, like high performers, people that listen to the show can relate to the animosity of like, I have to make this thing work. And that kind of changes. And like I said, transparently, I was working from a revenue goal. So it kind of not muddies up, but it changes the incentives of your decisions when you're based on revenue rather than fulfillment, or rather than trying, okay, what's the tooling of this offer that adds the most value and actually builds a business. Like I said, we kind of talked about off camera. My goals were to stay lean, and to have no more than a few people, because I just see what the trends of like where this industry and where a lot of other industries are headed with AI and everything. That staying lean and really learning to be a master of your industry, being a thought leader of your tool chest, and obviously building a network on the back end with some fun things like podcasting and stuff like that are a good way to, and that's what I enjoy doing. So the short version of that was, yes, my biggest priorities now in terms of revenue are to make this model as efficient as possible, and kind of get out of the more custom scoping. I think what that could look like, and I have my ideas, and I would definitely welcome your feedback on any of this because I want you to pick this apart. Is I think the next step would either have to be niching more down into a specific industry or deliverable, right? So we do XYZ software. We currently build on Webflow, Wix Studio, and Framer. So we could niche down by platform, or we could also niche down by audience, right? So we could say, like landing pages for specific vertical. We've done a lot in healthcare. I think the needs has to match what the deliverable is. So, like a landing page, for example, the 3K offer, that gets a lot of attraction from like solo creators who are doing a book launch, or they're launching an event, they have a community offer, something like that. They want to go and see, like, okay, 1 week turnaround, 3K website, look at all these good examples, boom, that's what I want. I think to make that offer effective, you really have to dig deep into one industry and kind of plant my flag. And I've had some commitment issues doing that, because I have a lot of varying experience. Like I said, when you start from the beginning of saying yes to way too much, you kind of get a jumbled mess of a portfolio. And we call that like portfolio creep. So you're just getting more of a less refined deliverable in the end.
I can relate to everything you said. I left engineering, like you left school, left college, and went straight in. I know you had that you're in an agency, but you pretty much went straight into building this business. For me, the 20-year in reverse version of that was I did engineering for almost 20 years. And actually, the first year of entrepreneurship of my own was building websites on any platform you wanted for any industry, local, online. It was like, you got money, I got websites. And so, and then, that also I started to find other services to provide to the same clients. That's, obviously another way to do this is to have a niche front end service. But, if you're working with local clients, like in my example, I'd start helping them with their Google My Business profile, and then I would actually go into their shop and help them come up with like better offers and bundles and specials, and because we were able to like increase the value I was adding to an individual client. And in my case, that turned into a partnership, and that's where the whole Fire Creek Snacks part of my chapter takes off. So, you're 24 years old. I know realistically the crystal ball is extremely murky when life is 34. For you, Andy, but you've got a ton of experience under your belt for the relative young age, and you've got very articulate, clear language around the evolution of your business today. I think that's probably in part just your personality, but I think it's in part because you're documenting what you do, which requires you to be reflective, and like kind of think about how things have worked as you're documenting them and building in public.
Well, also too, I listened to this podcast a while ago, and he talks about like having the three main types of stories ready for every time you go and interview on a podcast. So I had something ready to lay out. I'm not normally off, shooting from the hip, like knowing what I'm going to say, and I'm also not like very articulate either. So the fact that you said that means a lot. So thank
No, it was awesome. So, kind of the way I like to do this is sort of get different angles on the current conditions, and we'll start projecting forward, which you started to do a little bit, which is great. So we got the three main offers. Those are only 6 months old. Before that, you're kind of doing all the websites for all the people to get money in the door, which is what you should do. When you're early on, and you're kind of at this early scale stage where you've got a proven product market fit. You can obviously deliver. You've earned 100K in revenue in the first 7 months of this year. That's amazing. Sounds like that was your annual goal and you hit it in 7 months. Did I hear that right? So you're self-sufficient. You know that like you could just keep doing what you're doing and you're going to make enough money, which gives you the freedom now to kind of step back and be like, how could this be more fun, more fulfilling? Who do I really like to work with? Do I want a team? You're going to start getting into, you have it's the freedom, I guess, to think about this more strategically In the early days, you got to grind through it, and you've shortcut that process in a big way. But so just thinking about what you've done to date, and we're going to kind of transition into forward thinking and envisioning where you want to go. But based on what you've already experienced, are there certain things that jump out to you on like certain clients you did enjoy or certain types of projects you did enjoy? And then the ones that you're like, hell no, I never want to see another one of those again. Feel free to use names, but you don't need to, especially on the last part. But just a little reflective exercise here. Is there stuff that jumps out to you that you're like, man, if I could just have 10 of those, life would be good, versus maybe the opposite of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, like I said, and I told you before, to very much be critical. Like, how can we take this objective thing and like, I know we're smiling and we're friendly, but like, how can we take what we have and actually make it a business, right? And that's what I said is that, I mean, very much saying yes to way too much in the beginning. But in terms of past experience, a lot of times what I've learned, Dustin, is that the projects I enjoy doing the most also aren't I think anyone in business learns, like you start doing it for like a self fulfilling reason. And you find like, oh man, like it doesn't add a ton of value to the right person. Um, so like the 3K landing page offer, I found to get the best response from a certain audience, someone who needs that deliverable right away. And a lot of times it is people who are launching a book, they're establishing a course, or they just want a one page landing page. Say, I need something out quick. And the time to value is a big part in that. And I haven't niched down to a particular
Yeah.
industry in that core deliverable. What I found too is that the a lot of my portfolio, is like healthcare and tech, and those are the more custom scope projects, and those do take time. And also, a lot of times, a lot of people want a lot of the stakeholders in this project, they want to work with an agency a lot of times. So it's not something that I feel aligned with like my bigger goals moving forward of staying lean. They want to see that social proof. They want to see we have 8 or 9 developers on our team. Here are their photos on our website, sort of thing. They don't as much value the high touch nature of what I want to be. They more so value the expertise, the proven processes, everything like that. And they're paying to have the best high quality niche service done.
Yep. They're kind of old school. They want you to say we, not I, when you're talking about the work. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. And so it sounds like those kind of big custom projects that have bureaucracy and red tape and multiple decision makers, maybe not the thing that's lights you up so far.
Yeah, and it's true, and it's also appealing though because all you see, and I think we all have experiences with this as business owners or as creators, where all you see in the beginning is like, wow, there's a big budget for this project, um, and especially in the beginning, man, like I said, we're saying yes to too much, and especially when there's government involved, when there's a whole marketing team, there's stakeholders, a lot of pressure, and something a mentor told me is like you want to have your inbox filled with as many oh yes messages from clients as opposed to oh shit messages. Like, who are you actually excited to hear from? um, and to me, it's like people who have a stake in the business. And always it's a very different conversation when people are referencing a marketing budget versus a personal budget. So like a lot of times people, and with the higher scope projects, they are easier to sell to. Like a lot of times, the conversation is a lot easier, and I kind of fall apart sometimes when I view what I'm doing, what I'm talking about as sales. So it has been easier from that standpoint. And like I said, it's kind of like this messy middle of like I'm really creatively fulfilled working with people that they need the landing page offer that are custom skill, like doing the self implementation offer. That's not very profitable for me. It takes about 6 or 7 hours to do that. My hourly rate to keep the lights on right now is 140. So I'm very much drawn by like the high touch, adding value, sharing my expertise. And I know that sort of factors into podcast guesting and how I could eventually do that at scale. But I really like talking about what I do. And that's kind of like why I have that low hanging fruit offer too. So the long story short of it, it's there's like inclinations, and I can't commit to kind of one thing on either side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like, sounds like you like working with creators. We'll just call them creators, entrepreneurs, founders, however you want to phrase that. You like the energy of that. You feel like obviously you have something in common with them. They tend to be, and at least in the ones that you've worked with so far, they tend to be a little more scarce in their resources. And so they might do this done with you thing. at most, maybe they'll spend 3 grand on a landing page if they really need it and they're at some level of success. Um, I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, you like the energy of those people. Like you're scrappy, they're scrappy, hustling. They're going to use this right away to get results. And you have this more like we'll call them corporate, but you have this like bigger organizational sort of people who come to you, or you go to them and write proposals, and they do bigger projects. They've got bigger budgets. It's kind of a pain in the ass to manage. You got multiple people. Maybe you don't love to hear from them when they have feedback. But they have more money and they're like actively looking to spend it. They have a marketing budget. And so you got this kind of tension between people with money who you don't love to work with and people with less money who you actually love to work with because you love their energy and personality. Is that a fair summary of that?
Yeah, to paint with broad strokes, that is true. And that's why you can see, like, you notice this and you point it out, is like, to people that are at each end of this, the fact that there is the other end is like unappealing to getting more people like that. If that makes sense. So I feel like I'm kind of in this point where I'm at either a switching cost of having to do both, and like the entrepreneurial sort of like I want to do everything for everyone sort of feeling. And that's one of the biggest problems I'm trying to solve, because I also realize that it is probably a big part of what goes into this overwork and all the potentially negative emotions that the business could lead to keep this engine going long term. I don't think it's sustainable.
Okay. Well, let's kind of set the offers to the side. That's going to come back in the sort of the strategy side of where we want to go from here. But if we just think Andy circa 2028, so like 3 years out, you're full time running your own shop. You tell me whether it's still in web design. We can probably assume it is. But most importantly, what I want to capture is your vision for 3 years from now. Personally, obviously, a really important part of this is revenue, income, team, those sort of factors. And again, I know this may be unclear, or maybe you've got a super written out, vivid vision, and you could just like tell me in detail. But just give me a sense for like what winning looks like 3 years from now when it comes to your business and the way I view the world. The business is tied directly into your personal. So maybe you start with personal and go to business. But I just love to hear a 2 minute summary of like your 3 year vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that, I mean, for the listeners, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but I actually have a podcast that I've been running for a little over 2 years. Has 110 episodes, and that's a question similar to this is one that I ask, and it always makes so much sense to hear someone else tell their story than it does to tell your own. You're like I listened to you, Dustin. You tell your story about where you started, and then the meat sticks transition and how it led you to podcast guesting. That had the story brand chapters in there. You had just the whole thing seems like, yeah, the natural equation. I think part of that is when you tell it well, it makes more sense. But also it's like when, lights, camera, action on me, it's like I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And I'm just trying to like figure it out in the meantime. Right.
And I feel the same way every day. So yeah, it's easier to look back, and that's why it's always a challenge to look forward. And I always say, like when I'm doing this for myself or with clients, like whatever you described for 3 years is not going to actually be what happens. So don't put the pressure on like you're committing to it in any way. God, the universe, whatever is going to shift any of it. Anyway, but as you sit here today with the best available information, and I could wave a magic wand and be like, Andy, here's your life in 3 years. What would you be like? That'd be freaking awesome. Like I want to run towards that. That sounds appealing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am someone that has goals. So this is something I can jam on a little bit. Um, I want to transition out of fulfillment a little bit. And I was talking with a mentor recently, and I said, like, man, if I actually look at the podcast and everything, no strategy behind it, right? No guesting strategy, no thought that's going into the people that I'm having on either. Mostly just my network, past clients, people that I view as maybe potential really good connections, build goodwill with. I want that to be more of a focus in the business, because as I review my calendar, I record these monthly retros every month, and I talk about the business, profit, loss, retro, or just everything I enjoy during the month. I'm starting to get more implemented with like putting my timesheets into AI and stuff like that. And it's like, wow, I work too much. But the long story short is I want conversations to be the future of it moving forward. It's like, how can I build a business in a way to where I'm marketing it through stuff that I like doing, and I'm getting out of fulfillment a little bit, but it's like I'm a creative at heart, man. Like I want to be involved. I'm really big on just I could sit in Figma, I could sit in Framer, I could sit in Webflow all day and just say, man, like this CTA, like this pricing section, this hero section, I I'm jamming on that. And I also like so I'm dabbling a little bit in both camps, but in terms of like the ideal vision for 3 years, I want to buy a duplex. So that's like my next goal in terms of the life front.
house hack it and live in half of it, and
Yeah, baby. Yeah. So like, and as you can tell, like I talked about the six-figure revenue goal. Like that was, I'm very, for better or worse, I'm very outcome driven, and I have a very negative association with anything that I associate with quitting or failing. And that's kind of like how I was raised with sports and stuff. But in terms of like 3 years in the future, if I'm picturing like I would be really happy, I say I'm running a podcast that gets me leads for my business. I'm going to a lot of networking events. That's a big way I've grown the business so far. Columbus is a great place for that. And I also have the freedom to not just invest in property, but to um, be close to my family, to travel more too, man. Like there's so many, I get a lot of FOMO from my friends on LinkedIn and stuff like that. They're traveling to these events. And I get really energized by meeting people, especially with the nature of what I do being very remote and intimate with my goals of remaining so. I know I'm going to have to check that box with networking, with, more exclusive access to a highly curated group of people. I learned so much in an environment like that. And I want to be able to get into more of those rooms in the future too. But the ideal vision is some combination of living in a bigger place, making more money, and talking to more cool people.
and coming I love all that. And so coming back into the business as the generator of the income to do all those things, do you have, if I put a gun to your head and said, like, give me a number, like, do you have a revenue number and then sort of an idea? Is it still Andy and one contractor, or do you have like a small team, or how do you see that sounding enjoyable and fun?
Yeah, this is where I will not. This is where the coaching comes in terms of the structure. And I'm not going to pretend to know more than I do, but I haven't with, which I never do. I try not to anyway. But I think in terms of a team structure, the ideal vision that could make that happen is going to be me, one or two developers and fulfillment, something of a designer. And I know that there's like hybrid overlaps in terms of what hires could do in their skill sets. With this model, designer, developer, especially with AI and everything and all the tools that are low dev, the gap kind of between designer and developer can be the same person. Like that's a big part of my skill set. And also some kind of an account manager slash admin. I do a lot like in my own business in terms of like using AI to help me be as efficient as possible. Like I use a lot of software, use a lot of tools. So I know that I can remain marine, but I need help. And also just for like the fulfillment of like showing up for other people and building a team around what you do. Um, is a big part of the impact that I want to have. But in terms of the model, I think it looks like some kind of account manager who's client facing, who can account manager slash project manager who's overseeing one to two to maybe, I don't think in 3 years it'll get to three fulfillment people or team members, but some combination of an account manager slash fulfillment on the end.
Okay. What do you think revenue wise?
I live very lean. So that's one. I know that's going to change as lifestyle inflation and stuff. And these goalposts always change. I literally have a video of me realizing, hey, I just reached my six-figure revenue goal, and I was literally like, cool. What's next?
Yeah.
So I'm less attached, particularly now, just coming off of that. I'm less attached to revenue than ever before. But I see it as a tool to be able to like do these things I talked about. So quarter 250 would be really cool. I know, like I said, it's gonna be really cool, but it's like there's no emotions tied to that number, other than the fact that it would be really cool, and I know I need to be increasing year over year.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, you have a remarkable level of maturity, and I was always the young engineer who everyone's like, you're so young. So I don't mean this in a way that sounds like that, but more like for someone who's sitting here, a couple years into your own business, 24 years old, that you've already realized that is so important, that you've hit a number and you're like, that's cool, but like I don't feel any more fulfilled or happy or whatever. It is a tool, it is a scorecard. If you're running a business, obviously revenue has to be part of the equation, because that's how business works. But I had a similar emotion last year. I hit like the 7-figure run rate, and sort of like, oh, like this is what I've been running towards for several years. Now what? And it's like, it really in some ways it's jarring, but also it gives you this, you reach this place that most people never reach, where you have this number and you get to look at it and see what it feels like and doesn't feel like. And then, kind of try on, in my case, it was like, now I get to try on a new identity. Like, do I, I was a 7-figure solopreneur. Am I trying to be a $10 million CEO? And that's been a year work in progress for me, even as we speak. And so you just hit that, let's for one, kind of gap in the gain. Let's say freaking awesome. Like you hit six figures in 7 months. You're basically on a run rate right now for 150 to 200,000, this year. So I think 250, I wrote 300 before you said 250. So I think that's a very, very, very achievable goal. And I really think that number has a lot to do with the team size, right? Because,
Yeah.
if it sounds like if your take home pay was 100 to $200,000, like that's meeting a lot of your initial goals. Is that fair? And
Yeah.
so, whether
More.
you need a
Yeah.
$200,000 business to generate 200,000 for yourself, or you need a $500,000 business, has a lot to do with how much work other people on the team are doing, obviously, in your margins. But yeah, and again, it's a crystal ball. What I like to hear is that versus I want 100-person, $10 million company in 3 years, or I want to be completely solo. I never want to have to give any contractor a dollar. Like those give us some guardrails to work within. But so what I heard, 3-year vision, business wise, small team, Andy plus 1 to 3 other people, PM, admin, developer, designer type folks. Just kind of depending on the parts of fulfillment you want to stay in and the parts that you don't. It sounds like you're going to lead sales and marketing. Is that fair? You like that a lot. And then personally, networking events, hosting your podcast and being more strategic around that, doing more travel, buying a duplex, getting in some real estate investing. Yeah. And like one word that I thought was really interesting you said is like conversations. It almost sounded like if you had conversations that could like fuel the business goals, like that would be a pretty awesome approach to growing your business. Is that you, because you like interpersonal connection and communication. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I've done this and I was going through with my mentor recently and just like looking through episodes of the podcast with no strategy involved. Like how much of my pipeline has come from either referrals from those people or have been those people directly. And it's not even something that I had was consciously thinking about. I was like, okay, it's a marketing show. So a lot of people that hire me, especially for the higher ticket offers, have been marketing staff, potential clients, people that are in the AMA, actually, American Marketing Association. They support the show. So it's a very good lead in to say, hey, I want to spotlight you, have a conversation. And I mean, podcasting is a really good way to start those conversations and also flatter people, man. Like I am a very genuinely curious person. I try to get the most out of every conversation, not like in a selfish way, but I very much make it about them. What is their business? What are their goals? Talk through their story, Um, and my connection is like, what's the most, my biggest sticking point is like, what's the most efficient version of that podcast that is a marketing engine for MMG, which is my business. But also, leans into those conversations as well. I do very much enjoy podcast guesting, and I haven't dabbled into that water as much. I've been invited on a few just because of, you have one, you kind of get associated with it, and people that have come on have offered as well. But at the end of the day, you're spot on. Like conversations are the fuel. Although there's a lot of great conversations that go off camera. And I tell you, I mean, you know this, Dustin, but especially starting out and being young, people are much more likely to say yes to a podcast rather than, hey, you want to get on a call, And that's like I said, when I view anything as sales, it tends to fall apart sometimes. So that's why I prefer to just not view it as that and just chat on a recorded call.
Obviously, well, maybe not obviously. Anyone listening to this podcast, they would know that that's definitely my jam. Anyone that's ever been on a call with me that's a quote unquote sales call, they're like, "Are you going to sell me anything?" I'm like, "Not really. I'm like, I want to help you, educate you, and I'm going to tell you what we do, and then I'm going to let you tell me if it's what you want to do." Right? Like, I'm just not in the hard closing, and you know, I know that, and that's because I believe in the power of long form educational content and conversations and actually getting to know people and giving a crap about them, as that is my sales approach. And it sounds like that's your preferred sales approach too. My belief is that I'm going to know Andy in 3 years, and you may have a completely different offer, but everything else that you said is still going to be true. meaning maybe it's not even web design that you ultimately do, right? Like I started off with web design and I found this physical product partnership, which led me to podcast guesting, which led me to coaching. Who knows? You're very ambitious, you're well connected, you're continuing to grow your network. And with that opens up lots of opportunities that we just can't see right now, right? Like with AI and like who knows? I don't know exactly what the breakdown will be in 3 years. And it very well may not even be in web development. But I think everything else you said will still be true. It's going to be a small team, travel, networking, podcasting, conversation, fueled business. So putting that to the side, that the reality is it may not even be web. I still want to run with the assumption that it is website design, it is strategy, because it gives us some kind of clay to work with to kind of get a feel for like volume and how many relationships we need and like what kind of marketing would work for the scale of business that you're building. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely.
So I was writing down a few things just with your current offers, and again, we can dissect those a little bit more. But I really like again what the deliverable is next to the number is less important than like the number and the fact that you've got a done with you, a done for you front end simplified kind of productized service, and then you've got a done with you that's sort of the deep dive. And that eventually that could be a one-off strategy session. The middle one could be sort of a VIP 4-hour session with Andy on marketing strategy, and the 10K and up could be your full coaching program, group coaching program. So the deliverables are less important, I think, than the value stack that they represent. So, but I wrote down, let's say you did 10 custom projects a year. So you kind of have one a month and you took off the holidays or whatever like that. And they're at the low end of the range, they were $10,000. So that's 100K. Kind of put that, let's say you did like 24 of the $500 for done with you things, it becomes apparent quickly that 24 of those is still only $12,000, right? Like that's definitely not the revenue driver in the business. But we got 100,000 from the big projects, 10 to 15,000 for the little done with you projects that you're currently doing. And that leaves the middle piece, which you kind of talked about as being, the popcorn in the movie theater you want people to actually buy. Right now that's 3K. So if we even left it at 3K, I think it could probably easily be 5. But if we left it at 3K, you need like 60 of those to get 180K. So 5 a month of those is 180K. So if we got the 100K, the 12K or 15K, and then the 180K from the kind of middle core offer, that's basically 300,000 in revenue, right? So that's kind of my smell test of like with this offer stack and with your goals, do these things like are they in the same universe? And I think they definitely are. And I think the levers with the offers are either more custom work, which doesn't sound like you really want to do, or just more high quality volume pointed at the middle tier. 3 to 5K offer, that's going to be 40 to 60 projects at that level a year. Someone else can probably do the bulk of the fulfillment. You're sitting in a strategic seat and pointing them to do the work. So I know I talked through that fast, but I kind of want to just do some rough math of like, and I wish I had a whiteboard like Nathan Barry, but like we kind of put the numbers on a board, this 300,000 with your current offer stack and sort of like a reasonable volume of clients past the smell test. I feel like it does, but what's your feedback to all that math?
Yeah, I think, well, the numbers sound good. For me, it's about the systems to make that happen too. And what my role would have to be in removing the emotion and the creative part that I need to have in the fulfillment. I've had a lot of bad experiences in the past with people who, okay, I'll get on a call with you and then immediately like next checkpoint you're transferred over to an account manager. And I'm very personally, and like we even talked about how big the relationship piece of this is. I don't want to lose that. And I know and regardless, like you said, of where the industry heads in terms of how marketable web design specifically is, I think there's I think there's a huge opportunity to set yourself apart with good design. And that's one of my core foundations. I think what a lot of people do wrong is they spend all this time nurturing their client base, spend all this time with content, with building, one-to-one relationships. And then when they get close to the sale and they send people to a website, it looks like a white labeled thing that is totally unmatched to this experience of you that I had beforehand. And that's true even across the spectrum for all the offers, right? Like people and are becoming much more personalized on social media. And when you get to this place where you have a website where you have all this creative freedom to say like, man, this really is my ground, I own this section of the internet, can be very creative. You're not confined to a 3 by 3 grid of, outputting a specific post, specific format. You can really emphasize your message, especially that close to the sale. And that's one of my core foundations. And I don't think AI will ever be able to take that away on a custom scope. So, like I said, and am not, I don't tie my identity to being a designer, to being a creative. So, with all that being said, too, the numbers sound good. They sound fulfillable. For me, it's really doubling down on, okay, what's the project management? Who are the people? And also not losing the creative edge that I think is the differentiator in terms of, some of the value that I can offer aside from just the client experience.
Yeah, I think that's really the key with any, some people love this word and some people cringe. You might be a little more in the cringe bucket, but the idea of a productized service, right, where it's a repeatable process that you can deliver on that doesn't feel like a repeatable process that you deliver on, right? And so if we were really focused on like how can we deliver a lot of this middle tier really high quality custom landing page that captures the creative energy of the person that is owning it. And with that being true, is it also true that Andy has to click every button to create that page? I think the obvious answer is no. But so where the tension comes up, and I've faced this tension myself and see it all the time with clients, is like, how do we keep the soul of what makes Andy's work unique and the things that you believe in, and this idea that design should be personal and it should be directly tied to revenue and it's the closest thing to a sale, like all that's true. How do we keep that soul in a product that doesn't require your body to fulfill everyone, right? Because ultimately, if you're going to build a business, it can't be you sitting there opening up 3 different types of web designs of software and clicking every button, like that's, and it shouldn't be, right? The thing is, both those things can be true. Like it can have your spirit, your signature, your energy, and the way that happens is through leadership and culture and hiring the right people, and those sort of things. And I think, especially this 3 year mark, $300,000, you could certainly just do it all. You could. I think it's going to conflict with your goals of travel and freedom and maybe be able to like spend some time in real estate investing. So I think the way to make both those things true at the same time is probably like one key implementer who you trust. And I still think you could personally sign off on and direct the creative and strategy behind each of these designs, right? Like 5 a month, 1 a week is basically like, hey, we have 1 project a week that's at this tier. I'm Andy and I'm going to spend 2 hours on it. Like I'm going to direct, I'm going to have I'm going to be the conduit to the client still. And I'm going to direct the strategy and give my vision to it. But someone else can click all the buttons, give me a first draft review. And the 10-80-20 or 10-80-10 is what we're looking for. Andy's in the first 10% because you're the vision, you're the strategy. Someone else can do 80% of the actual work and creating the page. And obviously it's not just a rando person, it's part of your team who understands your vision and thinks like you do about design and optimization and conversion. And then Andy's involved in the last 10% before it gets delivered to the client. And you could even still be the client interface at that level, easily at that volume. And so I do think that's very solvable from a team standpoint. And yeah, again, it's like I want you to be 100% excited when you show this to the client that they feel like you did it all, because this person's very much an extension of you. But instead of you spending 80 hours a week working, you're spending more like 20 on this part of the business, and someone else is taking the bulk. Someone who's probably actually more fast, more efficient, who knows all the tools, tricks, AI, all the stuff to make it
Oh yeah,
as possible. Like, how does that feel?
better than me. I would love to have someone better than me that I can. And that's just like the creative. I think a lot of us get into a lot of head trash kind of around like our own businesses, like especially when it's creative. It's like I have to see. I have to struggle through the pixels and the Flexbox layout to justify the value of this design. And that is something that I am actively working on. But from a lifestyle standpoint, from making this sustainable standpoint, I love that 10-80-10 philosophy. I'm a big fan of Dan Martell, and that really resonates with me too. And I agree too. I think the biggest problem that I'm trying to solve is, like always, is the marketing engine behind it. Like being able to make sure.
Yes, that's where I wanted to spend the rest of our time. But I didn't want to not speak to the fact that there's a business, basically all businesses, sales, marketing, fulfillment, or operations. Some people call it admin, finance, right? Like you could totally have an administrative assistant handle 10 hours a year week right now. Finance could be pretty simply outsourced, and so the three that remain are fulfillment, sales, and marketing. And so you have an attachment to fulfillment. I still have an attachment to fulfillment. I'm still involved in all of our calls. And I have someone who co-coaches with me and can be there when I can't and who can offer a perspective I can't. And, in the future, I'll do less and less fulfillment over time. But the point is, fulfillment is, for many people, they would start this conversation and only talk about sales and marketing because they're like, fulfillment's whatever. It's like, it's a commodity, right? You are
Yeah.
a craftsman. You care a ton about fulfillment. That's why I don't want to just skip over it and go straight to sales and marketing. I just wanted to kind of get to a
Yeah.
point where we
Great
both
call.
agree there is a version of this business with a very small team that you could feel good putting your name behind, that doesn't require all your time in fulfillment, because we want to spend your time on sales and marketing, because that's also a passion of yours. And I think what you'll find is you'll actually get a lot of creative juice when you do more of that better. And the fulfillment will still be important and you want to believe in it, but you're an entrepreneur and you have creative energy. Right now, a lot of that gets spoken into the product, and we want to continue some of that, but we also want to have enough bandwidth in your brain and schedule where you can actually spend more time in sales and fulfillment, because you want to triple your business and have a team to feed. And so, is that? I don't want to be prescriptive here, but does that all feel right?
Yeah. Dude, that's music. That's no music to my ears, dude. Music to my ears.
So let's talk about the fun part, marketing. So in that scenario, we need, let's call it 100 clients a year, and 25 of those are like one-off $500 clients, right? So those, and some of those are actually, some of these are the same clients. So there's like 10 custom,
Right.
60 in the middle, and 24 at the very low end. But some of those 24 become the 60, and some of those 60 become the 10. So let's just call it 80 clients a year or something like that we have to actually secure to feed this business. And if we increase the price point, which I would probably be a big fan of, we could double the price point and get that down sub 50. So I mean, you really probably need 40 to 50 clients a year to have a $300,000 business, the bulk of which, 80% of which, is in the $3,000 to $6,000 landing page offer, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why I like to use numbers, because it's like, okay, well, 48, that's four, or that's four a month. Like, okay, that's one a week. So it's like, oh, one new client a week feeds a $300,000 business that supports one full-time designer, that allows Andy to just mostly focus on getting the one a week new client.
Right.
So that's kind of our parameters that we're thinking about for volume of business. I do want to talk real quick before we start talking too much about just marketing specifics. You actually said this earlier, but I think it's really important. If we want to double the price of that offer and that middle tier, and we want it to be as repeatable as possible while still feeling very special to the client, I totally agree with something you said earlier, and that is, you will need, doesn't have to be today, but you will need to get more specific on one or two or both things, and that is uh, identity or intent for your clients, right? And so you kind of said this earlier. With target marketing, you can specialize in identity, or you can specialize in intent, or you can specialize in both. Identity just means, who are these people that you work with, right? Like, they're founders or solopreneurs or creators. Are they in a certain vertical? You mentioned like healthcare, tech. There's a lot of different labels that people can wear that we can point to them and market to them. There's also intent, which is like, I need this very specific service, or I need this very specific outcome. And you just meet them in the spectrum of their life at the point when they need this very specific thing that you offer. Identity and intent are two separate things. But if we put them at an intersection and we say, I work with this exact person at this exact moment, it becomes super easy to market to them, right? And
Yeah.
so my own example, just to make this not you, and then we'll zoom back to you, the accelerator, the thing I run, very loose identity. Like, I work with entrepreneurs, they're on a mission, but they're all different industries. The intent's extremely specific. In 90 days, build a $100,000 podcast guesting machine, right? Like, that is very specific. And so that I've chosen much more specific intent, not so specific identity, and I can move that over time. But like, that for a lot of reasons that we don't have to get into right now. I've done that on purpose. So as you think about, if you can only deliver $6,000 landing pages to someone, is there like identity that you're really big on, or is there intent, like what this would do for them, and that's how you're going to meet them at this transition point in their entrepreneurial career where they need this thing? Like, speak to me a little bit about that, and maybe we can get some more clarity on what this looks like as a productized service that can deliver at scale and still feel awesome.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And you laid all that out really well. And without committing to anything kind of live on an interview, like the direction I want to go,
We're not going to sign a contract. Is
I was waiting on that, dude. But yeah, like as you talk through that, what I can envision being the easiest is very niche because you talked about matching those two together. And I've seen it like the whole gamut of like where websites, and so some industries I don't even need websites, right? Where you can work purely organic and a website that's within the scope of deliverable doesn't match where you want. And there's been so many times where I mean it's the crux of the implementation done with you offer is that they either don't want to invest in the website itself or their industry just doesn't need it. And a lot of times I refer people to Wix, Squarespace, Cardco is a really good one, or the native tools, the native marketing tools that they're currently using, and just like record walkthroughs on how they can do that stuff. Um, and that sort of the position seat of like the trusted resource for all things websites is kind of where I want to sit, and then I can more strategically play the chess pieces in terms of what offers look like. But if I and I've on a lot of long walks thinking about, okay, what is that offer audience fit that is, right in the middle, that is that bucket of popcorn. And to me it is very much it's a gray area because like I said, I'm still on both ends of the spectrum. But in terms of what I have experienced in the landing page offer for a specific vertical, it's a no-brainer decision for people who are on a time bound thing. Like, okay, I'm launching a book at this time bound event. I'm launching this course event, this time bound event. I see great design and I need it. But then also, marketing managers who, like I said, this is where the messy part comes in, is a lot of my network and the people that I've met either through LinkedIn or through the AMA, all the people that have come through the podcast that I interview and have met are in marketing, and they are sort of this higher ticket fulfillment offer. And while those aren't necessarily the most profitable, the most enjoyable, they are easier, like we talked about. So, like I said, without committing to anything live, those are the fun balls that I am currently juggling. And I'm like, there's a version of this too where it is two separate businesses, Dustin. Like, and I'm big on like seeing things through and not. I know the shiny object and not entrepreneurial thing. And I talked about like bouncing between golf and personal training and doing this. Like, I know that exists, so I'm being very cognizant of that. But um, that is what we're working with. Is like that's my current information in terms of where I think the biggest value add would be for that middle tier offer versus what reality is in terms of all the where the umbrella is kind of spread. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So I heard there, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the middle offer, we'll just call it, the 3 to 6K landing page oriented offer is much more intent driven, whereas the custom work is much more identity driven. It's like the custom work, 10,000 and up, that's going to be more associations, agencies, corporations. And yeah, whether they're two companies or whether they're two divisions within the same company, yeah, it doesn't really matter. But I do, in hearing you speak through it, that makes a lot of sense where that bigger project, custom project is more of an identity focus on your marketing efforts, and the repeatable productized service has much more intent. And it sounds like creators with a deadline who just want like the best version of the landing page without a lot of their personal effort. And so, yeah, books, events, yeah, those are two that you mentioned. Are there other sort of intent? Like the best way to sell something, the best place to meet someone when you have something to sell them is in a period of transition, right? And so in this case, the transition of I'm becoming a published, author, or I'm speaking at an event, or I'm hosting an event, or I've
Yeah,
got a new offer I'm launching, and I'm launching a new business, and I need the minimum viable representation of my brand and my website by September 15th because that's when I'm launching. All of these things seem like time bound creative events by entrepreneurs. Is that like a fair summary?
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, like this was kind of capitalizing on my what I viewed as my advantage is my like quick working, like I can fulfill very quick, I can align very quick. I'm very good at sensitizing. Okay, what are the goals of this offer, this course, this speaking event, this book, like this very time bound thing, and we can get it solved quickly. And if you go to the portfolio, you can see a lot of examples that are like it, and it's a lot. Yeah, that's the idea kind of moving forwards is what's the productized, like you said, version of that. By the way, I love the term productized service. I know there's a lot of annotations that come up when we talk about the creative fulfillment behind it, but to me that is like the easy. None of this is easy, by the way, and this is why I commend you for having to coach people through, like, even I'm talking about, it's like, dude, I'm putting you through hell with like all of this confusing business stuff that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, this is actually my this is where I get a lot of creative juice. Is like the thing I love to help people with is clarity. I feel like clarity is like the greatest gift I can give someone, and podcast guesting is a process of clarity in a lot of ways. And so that's why in our accelerator, there's to share with you, like on day one, a lot of people are like, I need leads. I want to do podcast guesting. I'm like, awesome. Like we promise that we have an ROI guarantee. Like you'll definitely get that. And some people are like, hey, I want to like be in a group coaching program because I want to run one, and you do a good one. But on day 90, when we're done with that accelerator experience, every 100% of the people ever who have been through it say some version of clarity and connection as the thing they actually got. And so I say that
Yeah,
because while podcast guesting is the hook and it's like the thing I'm known for, and I've had a lot of success with it, and it is all of those, it's all true. But underlying that, the thing people actually need when they come into our world is usually more clarity and more connection, right? Like, how do we,
yeah,
how do we find you more clients, but also referral partners and peers and mentors and all that stuff? And so I've realized that after 3 years in this business, and that's why I kind of opened this whole second chapter of our session here with like, you may not even be doing websites in 3 years. Like you're a super smart dude, but you're going to do something that is in this realm of a service based, entrepreneurial facing, productized service at these kind of price points. Like that's my prediction. You're going to do something like that, and it may be that the thing that you're providing is like I'm not selling clarity because no one wants to buy it, but so I sell podcast
yeah,
guessing, but I actually give
yeah.
them clarity. So anyway, I take it as a compliment when you're like, this is a mess, and I'm sorry to like throw up on you. Like this is like it's like what I actually love to do. So I think with that, like, so we can kind of get to an endpoint and some action items here. I think in my prescription here, what I would say is like, let's focus our marketing, at least in the near term, on the intent and focus on the the people who need the thing that your middle tier provides, and then realize that sort of by doing that actively, we will residually get the larger custom clients, right? Like you're still going to show up in your local networking groups. There's still going to be CMOs at large companies who listen to the same podcast, but listen to the same place that you may be talking about the need for, like talking about the fact that websites are the closest thing to the sale and what the elements of a great converting landing page are and why you need this if you're launching a book. Like we're maybe talking to an end client who maybe is focused on the $3,000 to $5,000 landing page. By doing that actively, we will definitely residually pick up the consulting client, the big fish who needs a custom solution. And you'll also pick up the people who are like, man, I'm going to need that one day. I'll spend $500 and go do a strategy session. But I think you want to focus your marketing on one of the three tiers and let the other ones come organically, versus trying to consciously focus on all three at once because you'll never get anywhere. Does that feel right?
That's a really good insight. Yeah. And also, yeah, I never thought about it as targeting the one targeting just one of the offers. I'd always just kind of viewed it as more on an audience level without really relating it back to in terms of like the content I'm putting out and who I'm choosing to interview and stuff like that. That's actually a really good insight. I never really thought of like interviewing. So maybe that is more of the pivot of saying, okay, maybe I do interview more people who have the need for the middle offer rather than just people in marketing, people. And I've kind of been shooting from the hip with the whole podcast. I mean, ever since I've gotten looped into your content, I've been more cognizant of saying, okay, how do I make this a marketing asset for my business? And it's really helped with that clarity. Like what we talked about in the beginning is how much of my pipeline has come from not knowing. And so I can only imagine when you start to apply some of this stuff, how it could lead to real business results, you know?
That's what you got these signals that say when I have conversations, whether that the AMA in Ohio or they're a little bit guesting that you've done, and especially hosting, good things happen, right? Like I'm not really intentional about it. I don't have a specific strategy, but just by showing up and doing it, I am getting business. Like that's a super good signal. Now, how can we focus that signal to get more from less and to get leverage in the work that we're doing and to be super intentional about it. So I have one sort of setup question, and then we're going to get into kind of like the final prescriptive strategy on how I would market this.
Jam.
I always like to think in terms, yes, we've got end users and in clients in this case that we want to talk to, and we're going to do that. But, if you know my analogy with the profit cake, there's like, that's the kind of the base of the cake. When there's partners in the middle and there's like high ticket prospects at the top, I want to focus on that middle tier. So if we think of, let's call them centers of influence, like who serves your ideal client already and has a bunch of them that you could just be a partner to versus trying to go out and get every individual end user yourself. And so some of the things I wrote down as you're talking, I'm going to suggest these to you and you can add to the list or you can delete. I wrote communities. So I think of like Seven Figure Leap, my community. Everyone in there does podcast guesting. Many of them, when they come to us, they don't have a lead magnet or the lead magnet needs major revisions. A lot of them don't have landing pages. They're not website designers. They're like a marriage coach who's like, oh, like here's the thing I would love to talk about on the podcast and give people as a free gift. And then they're like, how do I make that? And of course, we give them tutorials on Kit and like, but man, if you're in our community as an example, and we did a workshop on what makes a great landing page coming out of a podcast, and like, hey, Andy can just build it for you for $4,000, and like I think communities would be a center of influence. Another one I wrote would be agencies. There are lots of agents, marketing agencies, and other agencies who serve your ideal client, but they're not looking to pull off a custom landing page in a week because that doesn't fit their model, right? And so you could be a specialist referral from the agency and give them, a little referral fee as a thank you. I wrote publishers. I mean, if you're thinking like authors need this, if you have a relationship with the publisher, with all these authors that they represent, or selfpublishing.com as an example, or Scribe Media, there's these self-publishing platforms who have tons of authors. Some of them have done for you services for like 30 grand. Well, they'll make the book and stuff, but they're not usually in the business of landing page design. I wrote speaker associations because you said people that have events coming up. So that's where my brain immediately goes, is like, hey, I got this thing I want to sell. I know who I want to sell it to. Who already has a collection of these people that I can just go talk to them, and then we'll get a lot of business from that. And again, we'll still talk to the end users, but like who already collects our end users, and we can just go borrow the audience that they've already aggregated. So what do you think of those examples? Is there other stuff that comes to mind, or some of those that you think are horrible ideas?
Yeah, you've got it. Wow, you're pretty spot on with that insight. So centers of influence, that is a really good term for this. I've interviewed a lot of agency owners. So one of the examples that you mentioned, I hadn't thought more. And as you talk through it, like the community part of it kind of checks the box of wanting to be more of the like trusted resource piece and moves into the podcast guesting, et cetera. I had my, like I said, like I'm looking like through the headlights of the car. Like I'm only seeing that far in front of me of like I navigate the business thing. That insight of the agency owners being a good referral source for me. That's where we like talk through the past podcast guesting or podcast guest list.
Yep.
3 or 4 of my guests have been agency owners. A lot of them are in WordPress. They have a team of like, they're like that high ticket offer like we talked about. They have 8 or 9 developers. They have a team in house. It's unprofitable for them to take on anything lower than 50K. So I can become their Webflow framer landing page resource. And that has done me well, especially in the past. Those other insights that you mentioned around publishers and communities and speakers associations, you might have noticed I was taking notes because I didn't apply the middle offer, which what I was trying to build a business around reaching those centers of influence. So that is a really good. And also like, what's the content engine that fulfills that kind of on the fulfillment side too? Like, what do I have to be doing to speak to more of those people? Whether it's through the podcast or hosting some of them, or what I'm doing on LinkedIn too. So that was the biggest lean in moment for me of this, and that was very helpful. So
Yeah, and so then and this is kind of how I like. That's why we were breaking down which of these offers we want to focus on. And then are we going identity or intent, right? And like, hey, we're pretty big on intent here, which then opens the door to who the center of influence is, which is going to get to the closing part here, which is how do we reach them and the end clients concurrently. Like we got these centers of influence. So there's lots of more passive ways that you're going to reach them. You just mentioned it. Some content marketing, LinkedIn obviously is a great place for that. People like videos, do videos about why, the before and after of a book launch landing page design, that you've done. And it's like, here's why this one sucks. Here's why this one's awesome. And here's what the author said about the results. People love the content of like before and after, compare and contrast. And so you can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on your platform of choice. I think you mentioned one of your 3-year goals is like conference attendance, right? You like networking, going to associations, conferences. If you scratch that itch by going to conferences where, you know, the speakers are authors, it's like all of them, right? And you actually get to know the conference organizers, and you get to know a few of the speakers, and then the speakers are like, "Oh, I'm speaking at these 3 events." You can pretty easily work your way into a network of speaking, conference, author, speaker circles, right? Is what I was trying the word I'm looking for here. I was at Craft and Commerce, and I sat by someone I really admire. I just had her on my podcast, Pamela Slim. Really funny. We're sitting there in this conference. We're watching this guy speak, and he's a really, really good speaker, and he had these really cool like custom design slides. And I'm like looking at these slides, and I'm like, I know who made these because I saw him post on LinkedIn. And it's the guy who's on the other side of the room. I still never haven't actually met him physically. But anyway, I'm LinkedIn this guy. I'm like, did you make these slides? He says yes. And he's like, he's a funny guy. Anyway, so I'm sitting next to Pam, and she's like, wow, these slides are amazing. I'm like, I know the guy who made them. And so while I'm sitting next to her in the same presentation, I connected 2 of them on LinkedIn, and she hired this guy as her designer. So for her next presentation, and she's a great speaker. So that's a very simple microcosm example of just being in proximity to people who are doing the stuff that you need. It just happens, right?
Yeah.
So those are more loosey, sort of organic relationship strategies that we could spend a whole podcast on. But I wanted to point out a couple, like content marketing on LinkedIn or YouTube, being in proximity to people at networking events. Because if you're known as the guy when you have a book launch that comes up that needs like the best landing page, you got to go talk to Andy. He's the guy for that. That word travels super fast. And if you want to be a partner to agencies, as you've already started to kind of realize here, the key to that is to not make yourself competitive to them, right? Like, I'm not trying to take work from you. And in fact, maybe eventually you're like, anything that's over 30,000, I don't want to do because I'm not equipped for it. And you refer work to them. And 130,000 going their way from a conference feels really good. And they send you the next 10, $5,000 landing pages that they want to do. And now you could have your whole pipeline filled with one key partner. So I want to take a breath and kind of like, that's sort of the soft way to target these folks. And we have like 4 minutes. We'll spend our last 4 minutes talking about the hard way, the really the easy way, but the more direct way to find these people. But what do you think so far?
I think that was spot on. I think you, and I know I rambled on in terms of like all this kind of BS I dumped on you in terms of where the offers currently are. But we've reached this point now where you've taken what I was kind of working with, and then you made it a lot more clear for me. And you've also made me a lot more excited to, okay, what are the next steps? Because I was at this place of, a little bit of burnout, um, confusion, not really knowing where I was going to take either of these directions, and not really seeing a way that I could sit in that kind of, trusted web resource sort of seat and still make all this happen. I think there's a model of it. And some of the stuff we've recently just talked about in terms of finding that intersection with the audience and the offer is really what's going to make all of that happen. And this is my first sort of concession into like making it a reality. So
Good.
thank you.
Yeah, a lot of times we think we're burnt out and we're really bored as entrepreneurs and as creators. It's like, oh, I solved the problem for the 100K year. Now what? And so I think just having a new energy to be creative around, like finding this one great team member and signing up for the next 2 conferences with a lot more intention, and the stuff we're going to talk about next, which is the ongoing strategic marketing work. My encouragement there, my prescription there, I guess, is just freaking lean into podcasting. Like, you already love it, you already do it. And I would say hosting and guesting in your case. A lot of times people come to me, they're like, I want to start a podcast. I'm like, I wouldn't do that yet. I would like go do guesting for a lot of reasons. But you're already doing the hosting. You're already doing it well. You've done over 100 episodes. You're getting business from it. And I think just being taking a step back from what you've done with all the signals it's given you with this new lens of what you're really trying to get from it, and then have a really specific strategy. And then what I'm not suggesting is that every episode of your own podcast needs to be selling people stuff. I don't think that's actually good at all. I've got over 100, right at 100 episodes of my show. And it's been a very intentional mix of solo content where I'm the expert, content with people I really want to get in proximity to and know, right? So Pamela Slim, Pat Flynn, Jay Papazan, all these really cool people that the podcast gave me an invitation tool to have a conversation with them. And then my other main content strategy is client success stories. So I just interview people I've worked with and they tell people how cool it was. And that generates, a lot of goodwill and leads. And then we are currently adding the fourth type to this podcast, which is some live coaching, because I love live coaching. I get a lot of energy from it. I think people will hear this and be like, oh man, I want to be in that seat. And maybe they can't come on the podcast, but they could hire us and come into our program. And I think there'll be some of the people in your seat, Andy, who are like, I actually want to work with Dustin to build the thing that we talked about. And so, some of these guests will come into our program. So this is about as close to the sun as I fly as far as like direct sales from the podcast. And I think, Ian, you should create your own menu. But I think now with some more intention, you could be very focused on every one of these podcast episodes has some purpose that drives towards this 3-year vision that you're after. So we'll talk about guesting to close out, but what do you think on the hosting side? Are there some changes that come to mind now with what we've talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've kind of checked, I kind of mentioned in the middle, like I've kind of in the beginning, like I kind of checked all of those boxes, but it hasn't been mostly been just by like sniffing my nose around like who it hasn't been like hasn't had the strategic business intent behind it. Um, I think I need to better beforehand, like prepare, not shoot from the hip as much, and say like, okay, this is a marketing activity, and not okay, we're throwing on Zoom, we're jumping on Riverside, and I'm going to package up something that makes you look really good and that you want to share. I think the intention of connecting that with the offers that I'm currently working with and that you've helped me work through today is going to be a big needle mover. So, um, yeah, definitely excited to talk about podcast guesting and how we can make that happen.
Let's just, as one quick example, let's say in the spring 2026, I'm going to this conference and they've announced the first 6 speakers. Probably one of those 6 speakers should be invited on your podcast. And now you've got a relationship with someone who's going to be speaking on the stage at this event that you're at. And that's one thing that really cranks the flywheel in a big way, right? Because now you've got personal relationship with the speaker. They're going to introduce you to other speakers. Now you've got an introduction to the conference organizer. You're not going to be like a stranger in the audience. And so that's when I say like a strategic interview. It's not. I don't necessarily need to sell that person anything. That's simply a relationship, but it's not just a random relationship. It's one that you want to deepen because of maybe an event you're going to, or you're at an event and you just have a great conversation at lunch, and you have this platform to invite people to, which I think is a huge asset. And I think there's a lot of meat on the bone there with the work that you're doing with your podcast hosting. I think you probably know based now on what we've already talked about, but you tell me a little bit what you think you should do on the guesting side to help further the goals that we've discussed for the last hour and 17 minutes.
Yeah, I know. As I'm learning from you, the audience that I need, and this is, like I said, I haven't actively done like outreach for the podcast as a marketing activity outside of, hey, come on mine. So I think, and putting on my marketing hat now, what's a version of I'm listening to this person on a podcast. I want him to build my landing page, my website. I want to speak to their pain points. A lot of my best clients say things like, I send people to this page that is totally removed from my own branding. A lot of times they say I don't want to even mess with it. Um, I think this website looks. There's kind of two approaches that people take. Is they say I dive in and I DIY'd it and I spent a ton of creative time on it and it looks good to me, but it doesn't look good to the buyer of my offer. Or there's someone that have said like it's a total black box to them. They removed it. It's the total white label solution, and it's not aligned with their brand. So zooming back on it, that's what my perfect customer says. Where are the places that they're hanging out? What podcasts are they listening to? I think they're listening to a lot of creator podcasts. I think they're listening to a lot of entrepreneurial shows. They're probably builders in their own right. Usually, like from my experience in the past, I've always been like the second website sort of solution. Like, okay, what we have had to get started was a good place, but to really make it go into the next level, we need to invest in making this a marketing asset for us. So something along the lines of entrepreneurial shows, people who a lot of people probably like myself who are growth minded, want to invest in their business. and are listening to shows that kind of curate that audience. No specific names come to mind, but in terms of what I would talk about, it would be that it would be like, okay, if you want to DIY it yourself, these are the things that you should be doing. And this is the most important part kind of our process, that is the done for you solution to that. There's a structure I've made a podcast about before. It's called like the clear landing page formula. So you want to connect with the audience, you want to lead with the solution, you want to add value, um, and you want to the R, I forget the E, but the R is to remove all doubt. So making sure you have all the checkpoints of your website, like the CTAs, the strong headline, and giving people kind of a framework to where they can do it themselves. And it has like a nice analogy tied to it. Obviously, it needs practice, as you're seeing, but I know I kind of have an ideal version of what it could look like. I have a lot of imposter syndrome around getting started with it, though, to be fully
Yeah,
transparent.
absolutely. Everyone does, including me. And that's a lot of people. They like look at our program and they're like, oh, it's finding podcasts and writing a pitch, and it is all that. But a lot of it is instilling confidence. I'd say the clarity, connection. The one I probably should have said and left out was confidence. It's like, how do I deliver this with confidence? So I say that to say I'm not worried about that. You're a super smart dude, and you can be coached to be a very effective interviewer and teacher of a framework. It sounds like you got a really good one to start with. And I think to make that feel more sincere to a specific audience, like, and to make you feel more confident in delivering it, you can just be a bit of a chameleon depending on the audience and who you're specifically speaking to. So, in other words, if you're on a show that caters to authors, you're like, why authors need the clear landing page formula, right? And you talk about the specific pain points of authors. It's the same formula, it's the same framework. You maybe have one specific example that's specific to authors. The same teaching can apply to coaches on a coaching podcast. The same one can apply to speakers on a speaking podcast. And that is the power of a specific focus for which offer you want to pull people toward, and the pain point that they all have in common, which is the urgency of getting something created that represents their personal brand and name really well, because there's a lot at stake here. A shitty looking landing page for their book makes them look like an amateur, and it doesn't make them look good. And so yeah, book sales are part of it, but a lot of it's like they want to be proud to send their grandma this landing page, and they want to show off to their ex-girlfriend that this is them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a status involved with the things that you create that represents something to them. And even when if I said that on a podcast and someone's listening to that, they're gonna be like, "That's my guy. Like, that's who I want to. I believe that too. This is the person I want to work with. Is it $3,000 or $6,000? I don't care. I want someone who understands that that's what this does for me as an author, speaker, coach, whatever. Right?
Yeah, and I had never even put those words to it, but like hearing you say it back makes a lot more sense now that I hear. Like I'd never even said those words, and that, yeah,
We have our 5P framework that we do in the accelerator, and in step one we do purpose, and part of what we do is this exercise around transformation. And it's like, how does my ideal client feel? What do they have? What's their average day like? And what's their like self-described status before they ever meet Andy? And then after Andy delivers his signature service, how do they feel? What's their status? What do they have average day? And I was kind of doing that as a mental exercise as I was preparing to share what I shared. And that in your case, I think that status play is a really important part of this, right? Like, yes, they want to sell more books. They have more book sales before or after they meet you than before. But what they really have is less imposter syndrome, more authority, um, pride in sending people to a page from they're going to be standing on stage with the QR code. And when someone clicks that thing and looks on their phone, are they going to think, who is this loser? Or are they going to think, holy crap, this dude's for real, or this gal is amazing? And that is what you want to convey in a podcast interview. Like, you're going to have that moment if you're listening to this and you're a speaker or an author. What do you want that visceral first impression to be when people click your QR code when you're speaking and look at your landing page? That needs to be like the highest and best version of you and your brand. And I'm Andy, and that's what I do. You know what I mean? Like, that's powerful versus like, you want to use WordPress or Wix? Like, no one gives a crap. But like, if you can give me that emotion. And so that's where we start our whole process with podcast guesting, because I want that energy to then translate into which shows you're on, what you're going to talk to them about, and of course the actual interview itself. But yeah, I think we got a great strategy here. The ironic thing is, the thing you should be doing is probably the stuff you're already doing, but with way more intention and a way clearer strategy with a much heavier dose of the guesting. I think, like, keep doing the hosting with more intention and strategy. I think you layer on one podcast interview a week in a targeted way. it will easily hit the lead generation goals needed to get you one client a week, right? Like that's kind of how I typically think in terms, as long as there are certain types of offers with certain conversion rates, you can kind of think one podcast a week is sort of equivalent to one ideal client a week from that channel. That's exactly what you need to like hit your $300,000 goal. So the key to doing that well is just going to be the right shows with the right stories and the right call to action that lead to the the initial transaction that we are designing people to take in this. So
Right.
all right, man. Well, I love this, but yeah, give me your kind of your most useful takeaway, and then we'll tell people how to find you and your website, and we'll close out from there.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to say, like, I give a huge thank you. You've helped me kind of take this mess that I was kind of dealing with. What I enjoy spending my time on, which is podcasting, and how I can make that more of a profitable thing for my business rather than what it currently is. And you've also given me a lot more excitement in terms of how I can like make that happen. Like, what are the next actions? I think a lot of people, especially me, they have like all these messy kind of marketing channels, and they're always kind of a fish in water when it comes to their own business. And I've had like this self inclination that, like, because I am enjoying this, like for podcasting, because I'm enjoying this and it's not inherently like productive, you kind of get that, like, if it's not hard, it's not worth doing, sort of counterintuitive thing.
If I enjoy it, it can't be useful. Yeah.
So, no, this has helped me kind of see, okay, this can be fun and it can be profitable, and it can help me reach, my financial goals and goals in life too. So, dude, I want to say, like, first of all, I would appreciate you going long form with me, man. I know how it is. I know it can be draining to be a podcast host, to give you a lot of your energy to other people, and I felt that in leaps and bounds today. So I want to say thank you.
Good. Well, you're welcome. I'm grateful that you stepped up and we're the first of these. I don't know if they'll all be an hour and a half long. This is the Joe Rogan version, but they probably will be because, as you can tell, Andy and anyone listening to this is not a paint by numbers approach to building a business. Like everything we talked about is like a relationship focused marketing that's completely intentional and targeted towards an outcome that is personal to you. And so, in a sense, all of these are custom, and there's a lot of commonalities among any of these strategy sessions because ultimately we want to have a very practical solution that you can just go do. In many cases, podcast guesting will be part of that equation because I'm the one prescribing it, and I think it's for most business owners, it's one of the best tools out there. But yeah, I think it just requires some space to really unpack who you are, your goals, and the things that both intuitively and obviously jump out to me as like the levers you should pull to meet your own goals with your own god-given talents, and I think podcasting is it. And so
Yeah.
it's like, how do we make podcasting super effective for you? And I think we've made a lot of progress towards that. So Andy, as we close out, yeah, please tell people how to get a hold of you or where you want to send them from a website or lead magnet or any of those sort of things, so that they can maybe they want one of these kick-ass landing pages that we've been fired up talking about the last hour and a half. So
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me over on LinkedIn. My website is MMG Design. That's Mary Grape Design.net. MMG. And like I said, I do free homepage breakdowns for anyone that's interested in having one or two low hanging fruits that you can walk away with and implement on your own. And follow me on LinkedIn for all the transactional, messy points in the journey that I share too often. But again, like, dude, huge thank you to you
you're
again.
you're welcome. Yeah, go see what he does with this session because he's a quick implementer and he documents stuff. So I'm going to be following along. That'll be awesome. Yeah, mmgdesign.net. I think if I'm listening to this, and even me personally, it's like this stuff's going to get way more expensive and he's going to be a lot harder to get on his calendar. He's offering free website audits right now, and you can hear the passion behind what he does and the work that Andy's going to be doing. So I'd hop into that now and take advantage of it while it's available, because especially if we get to work together in a deeper way, he probably won't be giving away that sort of thing for free because he won't be able to. He'll be too busy with all his clients. So anyway, man, I really appreciate you. Thanks for taking the time, and I'll catch up with you on the other side. Okay.